Well, you have a long attention span, so let me ask you to blow past the people in the world who are ready to give up on hope and everything else right now, and you assess the situation currently as you see it. So do you believe the president is doing a good job in office?
I think the president has accomplished a lot. I think the first stimulus really pulled us back from the brink of a real depression. I think the health care bill, was something that no president had accomplished ever. I think that's significant. I think embodied in the first stimulus bill was the largest education bill since federal aid to education began, the largest infrastructure bill since the highway program in 1954, and the largest renewable energy bill ever in history. Those stories aren't told.
Why?
Because unemployment's at 9.8. If we get unemployment down to 7, then you can hear the sub-stories in the overall stimulus package, which, may not have been enough. But I think that he's got real things that he can point to.
Yeah.
He's not immune. He made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
What mistakes did he make?
Well, I think there were two. One is when he came to office, I think that he came because people bought into his story. He had the same story throughout his campaign, which was, elect me and I'll change the way things are done in Washington, and then we can do great things again as Americans.
Right.
And, if you do that, you got to deal with money. And I think if in his first weeks there he'd put a public financing bill before the Congress where taxpayers finance the elections of congressmen and senators and cut out all the special interests that, during the Bush years proliferated in terms of lobbyists from 17,000 to 34,000 in Washington and probably are higher today. I think that would have sent a message consistent with his campaign that, things are different in Washington now. And I think he would have gotten it because he was at 70 and 80% approval.
So you think Congress would have actually bought into this?
I think he would have peeled off a couple of Republicans. And then I think his second mistake is when he got the first stimulus bill larded with earmarks, that he, on a Friday afternoon after the market closed, should have vetoed it and told the Congress, I ran a campaign saying, I didn't want earmarks. There are 150 in this bill. Here they are. I want these stripped and returned to my desk by Monday morning before the market opens. And if you don't, you're responsible for what happens in the market. Yeah. People would have said, whoa, he's serious about being different. So I think those are two missed opportunities.
Are the reasons for the mistakes that you cite, which seem very reasonable to me sitting here, are they him or are they it? Are they him in the sense that he was not tough enough or visionary enough at the time to do that? Or is the problem that Washington is resistant to that kind of change? I remember George Bush saying, we're going to change Washington. I remember Bill Clinton talking about the third way. Yeah. Neither of them was able to accomplish. In fact, arguably the country was more partisan, more divided after Clinton and Bush, and we seem to be heading in the same direction now.
Well, when, changing Washington is a slogan and it's, it's, as you say, time-tested, road-tested, and it works on one level. Yeah. But then when you actually get to the things that you have to do to change Washington, they're related to process, campaign finance reform, redistricting, yada, yada. Yeah. And you have your pollster, and the pollster says, well, what's on people's minds is their job, or what's on people's minds is health care, or what. Right. So do you spend your political capital to do the process changes, or do you focus on what your pollster says are the things people care about, in many cases that they do? And often what happens is you end up following the tactical battle of every day fighting for the news cycle, as opposed to the overall strategic view.
A lot of the people who were defeated this last cycle were people who set up ideologically kind of like you. Pragmatic, more to the center, people who were there for a while, who had experience on issues and wanted to do the business of the people. And what we now have elected to Congress and to a lot of state legislatures around the country are people who are simply angry. Yeah. And who have no sense of what the actual requirements are to be in government. They just want to break everything down.
Yeah. Well, there comes a time where people get fed up with slogans and fed up with ideology. Yep. And it's true. There's been a shift, and there are a lot of people now in government that don't want any government. There are a lot of people who I think don't understand government and what it means for people. But at some point, that's going to fail too. I mean, there's a reality out there in America today, and that's the economic circumstance of the vast majority of Americans. And both parties have been in over the last 40 years, and neither one of them has successfully dealt with this issue, embodied in the following statistic. Between 1973 and 2009, for 90% of the American people, their income went up nominally 10%. So that means they were making less in real terms in 2009 than they were in 1973. You say, well, why didn't they revolt when 20 years into it, during the early Clinton years? The answer is most Americans saved through their homes, and homes were appreciating, and then the bubble, and their homes appreciated more and more, and they started borrowing off their homes and spending that money as if they'd gotten a raise at the office. And now 2007 comes, home equity loans are over,
the bubble pops.
The bubble pops, the value drops. So here they are, they're stuck. They've had no raise for 30, 40 years, appreciably, and they now can't borrow off their homes. And they are upset, and they're saying, who is on our side? And they sometimes are angry, so the days they're angry, they vote for the angriest person or party. And sometimes they're hopeful, and they then see somebody who says something that means something to them. But this is a substantive problem.
Are the corporate interests who did not increase appreciably incomes over that period of time the ones responsible?
No, I think there are these larger forces at work, and you know, technological change, the global economy. I think that
things we can't control.
There are things you can't control. So you have to figure out a new way that you can talk to people about having their incomes and their standard of living rise. And you know, we know basically the outlines of the long-term things. I mean, education is the key, research and development is the key, innovation is the key. Because the reality is, you know, you're going to make tires less expensive in China than you are in the United States. So the people who used to work in the tire business, manufacturing tires, now have to do something else. Chances are, we hope that they'll be able to have sufficient education so they can move into the new thing, the new industry that's created by the geniuses out of our education system who imagine a world that we now can't see.
But of course, you cited earlier all the things that the president, in your view, had accomplished over the first 2 years, and they are many of the things you just named, you know, renewable energy, education, more people with health insurance. And yet he gets no credit at all for those things.
But see, and you're falling into the same problem, which is, what about today? We got I need a change immediately. It takes a little time. And that's why, if you're going to do anything in American politics, it's very difficult to do unless you're at a very pregnant moment. It's very difficult to do in less than 8 years.
Well, let me